Stator swap on a 1997 Virago 535. Okay, so we know we've got a bad charging system on this bike because I installed a gadget off eBay that's a adapter for cell phone charger with a USB output that also has a voltmeter on it. Now the battery on this is completely charged, so that's why it's showing 12.9. But when I ride it, I can watch as the battery slowly gets, the voltage gets lower and lower. So we know the bike's not charging. And with these bikes, if they're not charging, there's a couple of different ways to diagnose them. I'll show that in a video. But this is showing how to take apart the bike and remove the stator, because we know the stator on this bike is bad. So the first step is you don't actually have to drain the oil out of the bike or any of that. You just need to lean it over. So the first step is leaning it over on the other direction. So here's the bike leaned over. I've got a tire for cushioning, and next step is to take the seats off and take the side cover off. Okay, so now we got the seats and the side cover off. I'm assuming you know how to do that, but if you don't, there's a key lock on the side of the seat. And you take the back seat off here, you just basically unlatch it, lift the forward out and pull it forward. And then this one, the front seat, is got two screws or two bolts that go in here and there on the other side. And you just take those out, and then that slides forward and out. Side cover, of course, one bolt there, and then it pops out of here. So the parts that we care about is this here, which is the connection to the from the stator to the stator here to the voltage regulator, and that's pretty much all we need to disconnect. It's sometimes handy to take this cover off to get this down through, and I'll go ahead and do that now, and then just simply pull the wire down out this way to make it a little easier. Now, so it sometimes happens with these bikes that you'll find that the connector like this is completely corroded, and to the point where it's jammed together. This is not, because of course these parts are new, and that's because I installed them, as you saw by the other video, or the earlier part of the video. But anyways, these parts are new, so they come apart pretty easily. But if they're not, and they're really jammed and stuck together, then you can sacrifice the stator fairly easily by bringing out a vise and putting a vise maybe on a floor jack, raising it up, clamping onto the back of this, and then using a screwdriver to lever off this part. And then you might end up with a connector that looks something like this, which you may or may not want to reuse. But as you can see, that's melted pretty good in there, and that's what often happens, is that you get some bad connectivity in there, and then things start heating up, and then before you know it, the connectors melt. So that's the old voltage regulator. But anyways, so we'll get that apart and then we'll pull that cover off and pull that down through the bottom. So with the cover off, you can see that this just goes down through there. It's easy to pull out. You can always tell the one coming from the stator because it's going to have 3 white wires, and the one going to the voltage regulator has 3 white and a red and black coming out. Now, just so you know, the black wire comes out here, connects into here, and then it goes into the wiring harness in here. And it goes through that wiring harness up onto the other side of the bike, and underneath the tank, top tank, there's actually a ground which that connects to. But that ground is, this ground actually is more than it seems, because it connects to several other different grounds within the wiring harness, which connect to both to grounding points on the frame and directly to parts like the horn and headlights and things like that that they know are potentially going to get corrosion on them, and so they want to ground through wires instead of through the frame. Frame, of course, is also grounded. And then also there's a ground from the battery that goes into another wiring harness here, which then that harness and this harness they V out, and then they go into a big bundle that goes up to the headlights. So, and the grounds are all tied in, they're all braided in with each other. So, anyway, the main thing is that, this ground goes into the regulator, and that hot goes into the regulator. Okay, the next step is we gotta pull that bolt, or that nut there, and that nut there, and then we gotta take that bolt out. And it's important to note the angle that this is at, because you want to get it back in the same angle. Otherwise it makes the bike really hard to shift. So I'll take this part out. Okay, now that you have to take the bolt all the way out for this to slide out. So you just slide that out, and it should come right out. Okay, so the next thing is the engine bolts, and they're here, there, and the one here is missing. This is a used bike. Anyways, the thing that's important about this is that you may have to use, in this case I've loosened these up because I've had this cover off before, so it's very easy to break free, but you might need to get yourself a socket with a hex on it to break it free. So I'll just take those out. The other thing, of course, is the gasket. The gasket on this is new, and it'll come out without trouble. An older bike, the gasket is always going to be heat damaged, and it'll fragment when you pull it out. So make sure you have a gasket in hand, because the moment this cover comes off and the gasket's out, you're not going to be able to tip the bike over to the left without all the oil coming out. Okay, the bolts are all out. Now it's just a matter of pulling the cover off, and as you can see, it comes out really really easily. It just pulls straight out. I put a box here to let the cover rest on when I get it pulled out. Okay, so now that's out. Now first thing we want to do is take a close look at the gasket. Make sure it's all really good, and this one looks okay. So we'll be able to reuse it. We'll just wipe it off a bit. If you get too much damage on this gasket, then when you put everything back together, it's going to start dripping oil and leaking. So it's always a good idea to buy another gasket. They're really cheap whenever you pull the stator out. Anyways, and as you can see, since the bike's leaned over, the oil levels is not going to come pouring out. So here's the stator, and if you watch the rest of the video, you'll see why it is that even though the stator looks really good, we had to pull it back out. And so I'm going to try to do what I can with it to see if it's possible to get it fixed, or alternatively switch back to the old stator, which I'm thinking I probably am going to do. Anyways, have fun with the rest of the video. Okay, anyways, so this is the problem with this new stator. If you look at the bosses, see how they have those kind of lumps that stick out, and those really bang right up against where the wiring of the stator is. And you can see that the way that they are is that the one lump bangs against there, the other one bangs against there, one is against on that side, one is against on that side, and the other one is against on that side. So the windings are just too close. As you can see where the person wound the windings, they're just too close to where the boss has to be. So what I'm going to try to do to see if I can salvage this is basically take my screwdriver, a blunt screwdriver, and put it up against where the bosses are, and just push and ease and tap the wires out of the way as much as possible. Then I'm going to put some tape, 2 layers of tape there, to see if that will be enough of an insulation that will prevent the wires from shorting out. Okay, so here's the fix, basically. 2 layers of tape at each side, and I'm going to drop this down in there and settle it in, and the tape will get pinched right there and there on those bosses, so it'll keep it in place so it won't be going around and causing trouble inside of the engine. And then we'll hopefully the wires, then if they during operation, if the wires tighten or expand or whatever, they're going to push against the bosses, but hopefully they won't work their way through that tape, at least not for a while, until I can get another better stator in. The other thing that I might do is just replace the old stator in there, which didn't have this problem with the winding. But I've also bought a new stator, and I'm going to be looking at that when it comes in. Well, looks like the tape fix and tapping and whatnot did work. We're now generating 14 volts. Let's see, 14.0 to 14.2. And we'll see how long this fix lasts. The other thing that you can do up to 14.2. The other thing you can do is feel the wires, and it shouldn't feel excessively hot on the wires, because that would indicate that there's a high current draw. Usually that happens when there's a short to ground. And one last thing is we can measure the voltage. I'll do that. So, testing 2 of the phases for AC at idle. We're getting 9.5. I go to the next one. Also 9 volts roughly. 9 volts. And then the last phase, at idle, and the regulator is putting out 14.2. That's a good system. And this, of course, the lights are on, all that. Now, one last thing about these bikes is that the system is really only designed for about 60 to 70, or probably about 90 watts of output power. So if you decide you want to put heated grips and all that sort of stuff on the bike, or a heated suit, you're going to overload the system. You're going to end up melting connectors like this, and you're also going to end up burning out the regulator. Previous owner of this bike obviously knew there was a problem and probably was running a heated suit, which is why he put this higher capacity stator in. But the higher capacity stator, for starters, is thicker, and he didn't use thicker bolts. But the other problem is that the higher capacity stator puts out more current, which the regulator can't handle. And as a result, it ended up destroying this regulator. So unless you're going to put in a high capacity stator and a high capacity regulator, and you're going to tap your accessories directly from these wires here, and notice that with this regulator, this newer regulator, even though it's cheap Chinese regulator, the wires are thicker coming from the regulator than going into the bike. Just a small amount, but that's really significant. If you try to tap an accessory off the battery, for example, then you're going to be running all the current through these thin wires. You're going to overheat them and melt these connectors. So if you're going to put in high capacity parts, and I don't know if you can even get a high capacity regulator for this bike because I've never seen one, you're going to need to pull the power directly from the regulator, and just assume that the regulator is going to probably burn up eventually. Another thing you might consider is spray painting the regulator black instead of the silver that it comes with, so that it can more readily dissipate heat. Alright, well, I'll add on some more to this video when the new stator comes in, if the old stator has failed by then. I'm going to ride this for a bit and we'll see how well it does.